Hi everyone again. My name is Comfort. I'm a sanctuary ambassador. That means I work with City of Sanctuary to build welcoming communities for people who have been through the system just like I have. Thank you so much for coming this evening. This session is about harnessing the power of City of Sanctuary networks in order to speak up for refugee rights. If you currently volunteer, I've hosted a refugee, I've signed a petition, or are just concerned about how the government treats people seeking sanctuary, then we consider you part of our network. So don't worry, if City of Sanctuary itself is new to you, it's going to be a very great evening today. And I will be here and I'll be supporting my colleague Anna, who I would pass over to now.
Thanks, Comfort. Hi, everybody. I'm Hannah, and I'm the Campaigns and Communications Manager at City of Sanctuary UK. In the background somewhere, we've also got Ben Margolis, who's one of our trustees and a professional campaigner who helped put this programme together. And we've got Megan, who's helping us with tech stuff. And then we've got lots of other City of Sanctuary team members and some other partner team members who are going to help with our breakout rooms later. So yeah, thank you very much for everybody who's helping make tonight happen. So if you're here today, then like us, you probably believe that people seeking sanctuary have been demonized, scapegoated, and disregarded for too long. So it's time that we change the story. People fleeing war and persecution deserve safety, dignity, and rights. So this session, along with the handbook, which hopefully you've all received, are designed to support everyday people like me and you, who may have little or no previous campaigning experience, to recognise our power in making change, to speak up for refugee rights, and to boost efforts to build welcoming and compassionate communities. We need to channel our passion into ongoing democratic participation beyond the single act of putting a cross on the ballot slip in the voting booth. Real democracy is about getting out there, standing up for what you believe in, and speaking up for the values that you live by. So one of the main reasons why misunderstandings and stereotypes about people seeking sanctuary persist is because people often lack direct contact and personal connections with people seeking sanctuary themselves. And at City of Sanctuary, our theory of change is built around the idea that if people have the chance to come together and recognise their shared humanity, then they are far more likely to speak up for each other's rights. Compassion turns to action. And this Speak Up for Sanctuary programme is about supercharging that idea. We hope that it will give you the tools and confidence you need to stand up, speak out, and turn your compassion into action. So this session is going to take about an hour and a half, and we're going to cover a fair bit of ground, but most of the information is covered in the handbook, so don't worry if you can't scribble fast enough. This isn't about how to win arguments. It's about bridging divides, because polarized societies hurt everyone. So this is about making change, but leading with the values of compassion and kindness directed towards everyone. So first off, we're going to be looking at how we can change the story and paint a different picture. This will be examining the words we use and the stories we tell to change hearts and minds. Words are really powerful, so we need to make sure that we're using them as effectively as we can. Then we're going to move on to some more practical steps that we can all take to engage with MPs, candidates, and the wider community. Some of these actions are really small, but the impacts can be big. And many of you may already be doing some of these actions regularly, and that's really brilliant. So please do share in the chat what's been most effective for you. But above all, the most important thing is to stay safe. And it's really sad, but in these divisive times, sometimes speaking up for what you believe in can be seen as contentious. So we're going to give you a few tips on how you can avoid and calm possible conflict. But most of this programme is about the power of storytelling and conversation. So I want this session today to be a really safe space where people can share their experiences and stories if they want to. So please, can everybody listen and show kindness to everybody else here today. So before we kick off, I want to start with a little moment of inspiration. So you are part of a movement. Together, we can build a UK that is a true place of welcome for people who are fleeing war and persecution. The hostility and division that we face today is by design. And so, in turn, the welcome and compassion we want to see must also be by design. So together, through this session and over the course of you completing this programme, we'll be drawing up the blueprints. So why you? This is about the power of authentic expression. When we speak from the heart about something that we're passionate about, people will listen. People are not hugely trusting at the moment, but we do trust the voices of the people that we know. So the small conversations we have with people can make a really big impact. Why now? The skills that you learn are relevant at any time, but we all know that there is actually a general election just around the corner, and whatever colour of the new government, we have the chance to break the cycle of scapegoating refugees. Right now, politicians pander to divisive ideologies because they think it'll win them votes. So we need to create a culture where that is just unacceptable. And if we come together now, we could create a UK that is a true place of welcome for those who need it. So whilst the general election is, of course, really, really important, it's good to remember that political systems come and go, and real change comes from shifting a culture. So together, we have to normalise compassion. And we're going to do that by breaking down barriers, speaking up for what we believe in, platforming the values that we hold most dear. So yes, it would be great to get a government who respects refugee rights. But if we want those changes to be long-lasting, then we also have to shift the values held by society. So why us? As a movement, as a City of Sanctuary network, and as the sector generally, we live in every corner of the country, we work in every sector, we study at all UK universities. So when we come together, the impact that we could have is huge and far-reaching. Each and every one of us shares the same vision of welcome. So now we need to put our compassion into action and work to make that vision a reality. We can all play a part, whether it's something small and quick or something more time consuming. So now is the time for all hands on deck. So let's get cracking. Okay, so first we'll look at our strategy, then we'll move on to some practical actions, and then we'll end with breakout rooms to discuss what we're going to be doing next. And I know some people run away before breakout rooms, but please don't. You can contribute as much or as little as you like. Our strategy is really simple. We're going to speak from the heart. We'll change the story, try and get others on side, and where possible, we're going to avoid and calm conflict.
Before we make a start, I like to do a quick poll. Right now, I'd like to ask everybody who feels confident speaking about refugee rights. You can answer the question. It's on your screen.
Has the poll popped up? I can't see it.
Yeah, the votes are coming in. So I'll give it another 40 seconds or so. So we've got that full minute, but keep on going, everyone. This is great.
Brilliant. Thank you, Megan. So yeah, who feels confident speaking about refugee rights?
Okay. Okay. I can see that about 9% of us feels very confident speaking about refugee rights. And we have 42% of us moderately confident about speaking about refugee rights. And 38% of us is a little bit confident, and just 11% of us is not confident speaking up about refugee rights. This session and the handbook are designed for people who might not feel equipped enough to speak up. So don't worry if you don't feel confident. We are hoping that we can change that with a session.
Brilliant. Yeah, so you don't need to be an expert to make a difference. You don't need to know everything about a specific issue. You don't need to remember hundreds of facts and stats. What's the most important thing is to understand why you care about these issues. So to kick off and to get us doing a little bit of soul searching, it would be great if you could take a little bit of time to reflect on what compelled you to come to this session today. And if you feel comfortable, please share in the chat. What events or thoughts or feelings made you want to speak up for Sanctuary? So yeah, we'll just have a minute now and just note down a few things in the chat would be brilliant.
Laura says, terrible local protest. Let's see, Enyo Luwada says, wrong narratives being promoted by the media. That's right. Melanie, to know how to get help for my friends, can't bear the current hostile climate. Shannon says, I've worked an on-site Nottingham Refugee Week, really positive experience changing the culture in the city. Great. Solidarity with people of migrant background. Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you so much. Would anybody feel comfortable sharing directly with the group? So again, this is a really safe and encouraging space. So if one or maybe two of you would like to raise your hand, we could Comfort, you could select somebody and we could unmute them, and you can just really briefly explain your motivations for coming today.
Okay, let's see. Who would like to share with us? Okay, Fellow, I'm going to ask you to mute now.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, brilliant. I'm a project coordinator. I work for a theatre sanctuary company. One of our members, he becomes actor as well, and she brought his wife from Syria, and now also he has got disability, but he hasn't got any band or priority or anything, and he had his show recently and we didn't know what to do. We search for any other advisors. We approach all the local authorities or whoever they were involved, but still this is undergoing, and he hasn't got any place to go. And then while we were dealing with that person, another person get his status, and they just asked him to leave in 7 days. And he was so distressed. He couldn't come to the sessions. He's very active member. He goes to college. He does lots of good things with other charities. He's one of the I don't know, very active members in other organization. He already paid to the society his portion, but again, yeah, they extended to another 7 days, and they said there is no place they could accommodate him. And last night I was dealing with those things, and we didn't know what to do, what to offer, where to go, what to suggest, and that's why I already decided to come to this session. I thought probably I get more to write a letter or know what are the rights to pass the information to them. And yeah, that's why I am here, and I told those two stories.
Thank you, Fellow.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, and we hear you on the level of frustration and distress. Keris, I think, has got her hand raised. If you want to briefly explain why you're here today, that would be great.
Hiya, yeah, so I'm Keris and I currently work for the local authority with unaccompanied asylum seeking children. So I work currently with about 20 young people who are all asylum seekers, all from different places. And I absolutely love my job and working with them, and it devastates me is you have the really happy times with them when they get their status in the UK. We support them to move on to their like independent living and setting them up for the future here. But it really devastates me when they get refused asylum here, and I've noticed it's predominantly with a lot of Kurdish young people. And I want to be able to, I've really started looking into it and researching it more recently, but when I have to go to court for their asylum appeal and stand there in front of a judge and give my reasons as to why, I want to be able to confidently say, you know, these reasons and learn more. And also I feel like there's a kind of stigma around these young people. So I help them with like their housing and their education. And I've noticed, especially with education, is certain colleges aren't very asylum seeker friendly. And I definitely feel like it's a massive problem in the educational system with so many asylum seekers coming in. And I've had a bit of an ongoing battle with a college recently around their kind of approach with asylum seekers. And I just want to kind of become more confident and advocate for our young people and any asylum seeker really against kind of injustice that they have and problems that they face within the UK society and just way of life here, and just be able to help them and have the best outcome for them. So yeah, that's why I'm here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, and we hope that we can give you a few tools to tackle those things that you're facing. So the strategy for this program is all about telling our own stories. Why do we believe what we do? What experiences in your childhood or adulthood made you aware of life's injustices? What made you feel passionate about refugee rights? Which stories stirred you? Why is it important for you to do something? So I'm not asking these questions theoretically, I really am asking them. But before we ask you to share some of your stories, we thought we'd share ours.
I was in the asylum system for 4 years, during which I couldn't work and couldn't access adequate mental health services. There was nothing the solicitors working on my case could do to help me with that because of the law. Although I now have the right to work and access to care, the negative impact of not getting the help on time affected me so much that I am just getting back into work gradually. And even with that, I still struggle. After 2 years of getting my refugee status, I was denied the right to adequate care, but I believe speaking up will help the government to see the impacts that these rules make and help them to make the right changes. Because if I've been able to access adequate medical care, I wouldn't wait 2 years to start working. But because I couldn't access care on time, it delayed the time that I had to start working. And even now, I can't take as much work that I can because the effect is still affecting me a lot.
Thank you so much, Comfort. Yeah, the system is brutally cruel, and the people who've lived through it will always have the most powerful voices. And many people will never have heard firsthand from someone who's been through the asylum system before, and doing so can be really transformative. But these stories are also intensely personal, so never feel pressured and never pressure anyone to share when they're not ready. But you don't need to have lived experience to be able to get people on side. I imagine most people on this call don't. But as our allies, it's still our role to step up. So my story is back in 2016, when I was about 24, I took a week off work to do some volunteering in the Calais jungle. But really, to be honest, I was mostly going to visit my brother who was working in the camp. And I'd never been anywhere like it in my life. I had absolutely no idea that people could be forced to live in that way so close to where I was from. It took, I don't know, an hour and a half or something to get there from where I was living, but it was so outside of the realms of my world, I might as well have gone to space. So afterwards, I could get a lift share back to the UK, and the brilliant, clever, funny people that I had met were left to risk their lives trying to make the same crossing in a small boat or in the back of a lorry. And the only difference between us was a piece of paper, and it just seemed absurd, and it was brutally unfair, and it kind of just shifted things for me, really. So you don't have to have an impressive story for it to have impact. Most people don't. I didn't go to Calais because I was driven by a noble desire to do good. I went to see my brother and because I was curious. But my story is still a powerful human way of connecting with others and conveying my values. So in the handbook, I encourage you to spend some proper time reflecting on these questions. But let's take a few minutes now to reflect on why we care. What are the origins of our passion? Have you experienced injustices firsthand and want to make sure that nobody else does? Or perhaps since childhood, you've wanted to make the world a better place? Or like me, did you have a catalyst moment? And again, if you feel comfortable sharing, please pop your thoughts in the chat box. And don't worry about telling a full story, just a particularly impactful moment or experience or a conversation would be really great. So we'll give you a few minutes just to have a think. Oh, you're muted, Comfort.
Sorry. Yeah, Kelvin says disabled all rights are interrelated, universal, and interdependent. Injustice is the norm. Fairness, compassion is missing. Emily says meeting Holocaust survivors who came here as refugees.
Wow.
Please pop up your story in the chat box.
Yeah, it would be great to hear from you, but no worries if you don't want to share.
Yeah. Beth says spent a year in camps in Calais, saw so much police brutality, similarly to Hannah. Now volunteering with asylum seekers.
Brilliant. So would anybody willing to share their story? I'm hoping a few of you might want to, like me and Comfort did. And much of this program is about the power of stories and conversation. So if you are feeling brave enough, it'll be really great to hear from you. If you put your hand up, then we'll be able to unmute you. Anyone brave want to do some talking? John's, I think, has raised his hand.
Yeah, hi everyone. So the start of my journey was quite a while ago. I was a teacher and an Eritrean boy was registered at our school. He turned up with an adult who said he was the boy's uncle and everything went normally. This was just a new student registering at school, put in my class. And a month or two later, when it got to the autumn, he had no warm clothes and in fact, he had no clothes apart from what he was standing up in. So we began to obviously worry a little bit about him and become curious. And it turned out that he was an unaccompanied refugee child who had just latched on to an adult who had brought him to school. And from that point, the whole story sort of opened up, and that began my journey into working with and sometimes against the school, the local authority, other care providers, the social security system, and so forth, to get this boy and subsequently his friends the sort of services and the education that they were entitled to. But, you know, from a very, I guess, innocuous beginning that no one had really picked up or even thought about, and then the story just developing from there. That's how my engagement began, and that was maybe about 25 or 30 years ago now. And yeah, it's an experience I'll always remember, and just the sheer amount of hard work and frustration with trying to get very basic things like a jumper or a coat for this boy at the time. I'll never forget it. Yeah, so that's my story.
Thank you so much. Thank you. If maybe we pick one more person to briefly share.
Emily.
Hiya. So I think in terms of my kind of why I kind of started to think about these issues in more depth is it was kind of something that was always kind of on my mind. And then when I studied my master's a couple of years ago, so I did a master's in applied theatre, and we worked with a group of people seeking asylum in the UK, and we kind of just got opportunity, as well as doing the drama stuff, we got an opportunity to just talk to them one-on-one. And when you listen to what like the real human beings sat in front of you are telling you, and then when you hear that kind of narrative that's pushed in the media, for me it just didn't fit, and it was really frustrating that what's being kind of just perpetuated to divide and to stir up hate is not matching the people that are sat in front of me. And in my current role now, I work with like similar groups of people, and I just think it's about kind of breaking down that perception of what these people are actually experiencing, because it's tough. And yeah, and that's me.
Thank you so much, Emily. So these stories are compelling to others. They're unique and they're heartfelt, and they make us stand out to decision makers and change makers like MPs. These stories belong to us, and as such, they're difficult or impossible to disagree with, really. Someone could doubt a statistic, but they can't quibble with how you felt in a particular moment. Our passion is our power, and these stories are the way that we can bring others on board. And finally, these stories are a good motivator to ourselves to keep going. We can take it for granted that we care, but having the origins of why we care written down in black and white can be a great source of inspiration and energy when fuel is low in the tank. So, when we're countering opinions different to our own, misinformation or damaging rhetoric, facts alone don't really change minds. Instead, we need to change the story totally. And this is a real skill, but something that we all should be practicing in our daily lives, in our social media posts, and the way that we communicate with change makers. So it's been shown that when we repeat what we're trying to discredit, we further reinforce it. Repetition is absolutely not our friend. So a poll in 2020, almost 2.5 years after the EU referendum, showed that 42% of the British public still believed the widely discredited claim that Britain sent £350 million a week to the EU. And that's down to the amount of times that number was repeated, even when it was done to show that it was nonsense. So our brains are naturally inclined to trust statements that are easier to process. And something that feels familiar, something you've heard before, is far easier to process. So whilst it's tempting to bust myths, in many instances, by doing that, we're only giving those myths more airtime. And you can read more about that in the handbook. So what do we do instead? We need to paint a different picture. And we do that by leading with our shared values. And these values might be ones of family, friendship, justice, liberty, equality, or social harmony. So, as an example, if someone was to ask me, why don't people stay in France? I might reply with something like this. I suppose I'd ask myself what safety looks like to me. Sure, it's an absence of danger, but it's more than that though, isn't it? It's about feeling comfortable and accepted and being with friends and family and having opportunity. I wouldn't really feel safe if I was alone in a country where I couldn't speak the language and didn't know anybody. Comparatively, very few people come to the UK, but the ones that do often come have family connections or can speak English, so they know that they'll be able to get to work quicker. I think I'd probably do the same. So this reply is clearly from my perspective. It's not some disembodied factoid. And it feels personal, not theoretical, because we're leading with safety, which is something that we all value. So now, again, if you'll let me, let's spend 30 seconds to a minute now thinking about the possible values that we could lead with in response to this statement. We should be looking after British people, not people seeking sanctuary. We should be looking after British people, not people seeking sanctuary. So rather than thinking of facts, think of the emotions, think of the values and the things that you hold dear that you could respond with. So don't worry about coming up with a whole response, just some key words would be great. So yeah, comfort, you keep an eye out in the chat box. Yeah. So what kind of values could we be leading with if someone says we should be looking after British people, not people seeking sanctuary?
Okay, so we have Katie says empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Leila says compassion for all human. Shannon says Jenny says family.
Mm-hmm. Now this is actually a hard task, so fair enough if this is like a slower one to get responses for.
Yeah. Megan says simple kindness. Sarah says I feel the British people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, the message are naturally generous and welcoming and want to help others.
Great.
Paula says we can do both. So Oliver says solidarity. Sarah says
Brilliant. Well, I think the answer that I've gone for when I thought about this was similar to, I think it was Paula. So I think I'd say something like kindness should be extended to everyone. We shouldn't have to pick between helping British people and those fleeing war and persecution. Refugees are mothers and fathers, sons and daughters, just like you and I, but the only difference is that their home is now unlivable. And if the tables had been turned and I'd lost everything, I'd hope that people would want to welcome me too. So just to reiterate, this exercise is not about being right. It's not about winning arguments. It's about how to have a conversation where people are given the opportunity to connect to an issue by recognizing the values that you both share. That could be the love for your children, your respect for your parents, the importance of community. Our sense of self is malleable. So when we find common ground in our values, we care much less about the differences that we might have. Now, it's unlikely that you're going to change someone's mind after one conversation, but what you can do is plant a seed of doubt. They likely will have believed what's being pushed by politicians and the populist press, and what you might say might lead them to question this for the first time. Then, when that person encounters another person who shares their values like you did, that seed might begin to germinate, and little by little, conversation by conversation, that seedling might grow into something significant. And thinking about it in these terms will change the way that we approach conversations fundamentally, really. It's about talking about why you believe in this issue, why you care, and what values you are leading with. Like I said before, right now, people trust very few voices, but we do listen to the people that we know. So every conversation counts. And we're championing conversations which are fundamentally kind, fundamentally human, even if you disagree on the subject of migration. So hopefully now we're feeling a tiny bit more confident about talking about why we care. And now we want others to care too. So this can come in two forms. We can reactively change the story. This means when someone says something wrong or misinformed, we can gently present a different perspective using the techniques that we've just learned. But we can also actively change the story. And for many people, the only stories that they're going to hear relating to people seeking sanctuary will be on the news, which are often unsympathetic. So it's up to us to actively talk about refugee rights and to actively present a positive alternative. So conversations will play a crucial part in shifting public opinions. So we need to be having a lot of them. And we're not the only ones who think this. There are quite a few different movements around the world now who are focusing more and more on conversations as one of the most powerful tools in changing attitudes. In fact, the biggest factor in the seismic shift in US attitudes on equal marriage was people having gay friends or family members and hearing their perspectives. And worldwide, it's been seen that children are changing their parents' minds on climate change simply by talking about it, probably around the dinner table. In another study about how to boost voter turnout, it was found that people who were called on the phone or sent postcards were not noticeably more likely to vote than those sent nothing. But just one in-person conversation had a profound effect on the person's likelihood to go to the polls, boosting turnout by a whopping 20%. So it's clear that when done well, conversations can bridge divides and have a huge, huge impact. So right now, the ones who shout the loudest are the ones who are heard. The voices of normal, compassionate people are just not being heard. And what we all think in this room today isn't unique. But if we don't state our position, if we don't talk about why we care, then others who think the same as us will think that they're outliers rather than the norm. So we need to be talking way more than we actually are at the moment. Now, it's not just about what we say that is important, but what we also encourage others to say too. And this is about building this movement and reaching out into our communities to make connections with other movers and shakers. And this could be neighborhood associations, businesses, faith organizations, you name it. So a business owner may never have spoken out about refugee rights before, but with your encouragement and support, they might do. And this encouragement could be in the form of a fact sheet or an invitation to an event or the opportunity to meet with someone who's been through the asylum system or the opportunity to sign a campaign letter. And with a little hand-holding, those movers and shakers in your community could become valuable messengers in the fight for refugee rights. And on that note, at City of Sanctuary, we work with organisations like schools, universities, councils, arts organisations, libraries and more. So if you do need support in getting these organisations on side, or if you work for one of these organisations and want to do more to promote welcome, then reach out to us. I think some of our coordinators are in this call at the moment, so they'll put their contact details in the chat. So you're not going to win everybody over. Trust your gut. If it feels like somebody's very set in their ways, just leave them to it. You can roughly split society into three categories. There's the people who are engaged and who care. That's me and you. These people are the ones that we should be encouraging to do the same steps that we're doing right now. There's the people who are very opposed to immigration and are very set in their ways. These are the people who are going to really struggle to get inside. And then there's the people who we call the persuadable middle. And these are the ones who are currently on the fence. They've probably believed some of the hostile messaging pushed by the government, but they could definitely be swayed. And these are the ones that we should be focusing our energy on. So when we come across people who push against what we're saying, it's worth reminding ourselves, even if it feels weird, that whilst it's tough, it is actually good to have debates and conversations about these things. So as we've learned previously, practice is key. Have some answers or responses prepared. Remind yourself of your values and why you care. You can draw on these when you need to. Think about your own personal context. Are you a parent, a teacher, someone in the LGBTQI community? Can you draw on your own experiences to help humanize these topics and find common ground? As I said before, our sense of self is extremely malleable. So when we find common ground with the person that we're talking to, they're much less likely to focus on the differences that we have. There are no right responses, but there are good responses. When talking to people whose opinions differ from our own, don't dismiss their concerns. It might feel frustrating, but meet them where they are rather than where you want them to be. So listen and try to understand where they're coming from. Now, there's a 2016 study in the journal Science, and more recently a peer-reviewed study, which have proved that by actively listening to a political opponent's concerns, that's finding common humanity and essentially giving grace, it's possible to change minds and reduce bigotry. This research shows that if you want to change someone's mind, you have to be patient with them. You ask them to reflect on their life and you listen. It's not about calling people out or labeling them a racist. So this technique is called deep canvassing. And I know we're not canvassers in this call, but the techniques apply to our context too. So the study actually showed that just one 10-minute conversation, which is led by empathy and active listen, could reduce prejudice for at least 3 months. I mean, that's absolutely crazy. Think about that for a second. It's staggering. So the study showed that the best way to respond to bigotry was to first listen non-judgmentally, then to ask if the person knows anyone in the affected community. And if they don't, and even if they do, they're then asked a question like, when was a time when someone showed you compassion when you really needed it? And this question is to get them to reflect on their own experiences when they might have felt something similar to the person in the marginalized community. It's also effective to share our own stories about being an immigrant, about seeking sanctuary, about being a member of the LGBTQI community, or just about the people that we know who are. And this technique offers us a way of dealing with people in our lives who hold prejudicial opinions and about people seeking sanctuary, or actually about anything else. And best of all, this powerful tool is available to everyone for free. And you can find more about this technique and the source material in the handbook. So I do look it up. It's really fascinating. So these conversations crucially aren't arguments. This is about showing a different perspective, leading with the shared values and planting that seed of doubt. There are, of course, risks of speaking out, but there are more risks of not speaking out, frankly. This is about being an active and engaged citizen. It's about participating in democracy. It's about supercharging our vision of welcome. But that being said, always remember to protect your well-being, know when to walk away, and make use of your networks to recharge. So we're now going to move on to some practical and tangible steps. We'll start with some small actions that we can all take. So whether you have an hour or an afternoon, there are ways that you can contribute to this movement. So this is about putting into practice what we've learned in the last few slides. Now, we all know that we should be reaching out to candidates and MPs, but how many of us are actually doing it regularly? So it's time to start seeing it as part of our normal routine. They represent us, or at least they want to. So it's important that they hear what we care about. So in this situation, it's important to recognize your own expertise, even when we're not actually the experts. So the change makers we're writing to are expected to know a little bit about a lot of things. So you are very likely going to be more informed than them anyway. So as we know, authenticity of expression is key. So highlight your shared values and remember that no one can just dispute your own experiences. And pepper throughout your letter your own values and origins of why you care. Do you have first-person experience? Have you hosted a refugee? Do you volunteer? And it's good to remember that in our letters and emails, less is more. Try and focus on 1 or 2 key issues and try and always come up with something that you want them to take direct action on. Remember that the person who reads this letter will be busy, so you need to catch their attention and keep it. So be simple and concise. You could also be creative. I was once told about somebody who embroidered a letter to an MP, and the MP was so moved that they had it framed and put on their wall. So if your MP already supports your cause, change tack and instead ask them for ways that you can collaborate together, perhaps by attending one of your events or a photo opportunity in order to influence change. And if you end up getting a generic response from your MP, which is often the case, don't let them off the hook. Reply, providing further resources, and encourage further dialogue. If your MP provides a supportive response, be sure to monitor how they vote in Parliament, and if needs be, hold them to account later down the line. And in the handbook, you'll find a quote from Carolyn Lucas about what makes a letter stand out to her. So writing letters to newspapers, calling into local radio, or featuring on regional TV is a great chance to show that local people do care. This is a chance to lead by example and again amplify the positive alternatives to hostility. Then we can ensure that this position is seen by decision makers in your community. So keep your eyes peeled for hooks. What's happening in the country or in your local area that might make what you have to say have more importance? Is there a festival or a marathon, or is it International Women's Day? How can you weave your messages into this event? This will increase your chance of being published and seen by more people. So for instance, as an example, if there's another series of Bake Off on the telly, you could use that to talk about how you've used cooking and food to bring communities together with new arrivals. If you run a group or you volunteer, remember that most people will not have a clue about your work and will find your general day-to-day work interesting. So make connections with local journalists, invite them to your events, don't exist in a vacuum, celebrate your good work, and remember, this is all about normalizing compassion. So it's really worth building relationships with friendly local journalists. They're always on the hunt for stories, and their platform is a great way of spreading your message. So these relationships are beneficial for you both. So reach out to them, talk about your work, talk about your messages, and see how you can work together. So human stories capture our attention, as we know, but we obviously don't have time to talk to everybody. So sometimes strong visuals can be a great way of grabbing people's attentions and conveying our values. So many of you will be doing these things anyway, but this is a reminder of the impact and the importance of visual stunts. And this could be as simple as having a "This house stands with refugees" poster in your front window. This shows clearly to your neighbours and your community what you believe in. Again, this is about normalising compassion, and we do actually have a poster template that you can print out at home in the handbook. Perhaps your community group, local school or art club could create bold, eye-catching banners and posters. Display these in shop windows or in the town centre. Join in local events, fetes and carnivals. And then using your new contacts with the local press, get coverage of these stunts. You can often achieve greatest impact by setting your stunt or your photos in a really recognizable location. So that could be banners by a local landmark, perhaps write messages of solidarity in the sand on your local beach, something that roots your messaging to a sense of place rather than just an anonymous concrete background. This makes it feel like you're speaking for the whole community. Birmingham stands with refugees, Swindon stands with refugees, rather than just this little random group of people standing with refugees. So this is about normalising compassion, reaching out beyond our echo chambers, and showing that the hostility pushed by the government does not represent us, the people. So on this whistle-stop tour, we're going to move on to some slightly more advanced actions, and this will just take a few minutes, and then we're going to move on to some breakout rooms where we're going to start sharing some ideas. So I know you've all been sitting and listening for a long time, but this will just be a few more minutes of me yabbering away. Okay, so events bring people together. And when we have the opportunity to meet others who hold views different from our own, or to meet people who may be from a refugee background, then we have the chance to break down divisions. We recognise our shared humanity. And this, as I said, is our theory of change at City of Sanctuary. So you could organise your own event. It could be something like a community picnic, a street party, a supper club, a friendly football match, even a litter pick. This could be with your street, your workplace, or your whole community. And wherever possible, these events should always be organised with people who have lived experience of the asylum system right at the heart. Alternatively, you could piggyback onto an existing event. So that's rather than creating a buzz from scratch, use existing festivals or parades or other events to platform your values. And this is essentially harnessing the power of local events to supercharge your cause and then reach people who may not have engaged with these topics before. And in the handbook, there's a really lovely case study of the Brighton City of Sanctuary group who joined in with the Brighton Pride Parade. So for those of you who are part of groups and organisations, events are also a great way of building relationships with change makers. And it's worth considering what we can offer the change maker or candidate. So it benefits them to be seen at interesting events with young, vibrant people. And similarly, it benefits us to be able to share our values and capture photos of the candidates standing in solidarity with our cause. So it might sound a little bit cynical, but it is always worth thinking about what we can offer them in return for what they can offer us. So this is the last one now. So surgeries, doorstep canvassing and hustings are all a great way to have personal connections with MPs and candidates. And we're going to be seeing a lot more of all of these in the coming months. So surgeries are normally held once a week and give constituents a chance to talk to their MP about their concerns. Canvassing is when candidates knock on doors and try and get people on side ahead of an election. And hustings are where all candidates running an election face questions posed by constituents. And in all instances, ensure that you're prepared. Make sure you know a little bit about the person or the people. Look at their social media feeds, or if you're looking with an MP, look at their voting record. This will help you think about the messages or angles that will resonate best with them. Are they a business owner? Are they a parent? Be clear on what you want them to do. It might be worth preparing a really simple elevator pitch. This should just be a few sentences setting out your major concerns of the day and what solutions you see that could address those concerns. For example, I'm really concerned about politicians using inflammatory language that emboldens the far right and puts people seeking sanctuary at risk. Will you pledge to not use dehumanizing rhetoric and call it out when others do? So the more conversations we have about these topics with our friends and family, the more easily these conversations with candidates and MPs will come. By talking regularly, you'll feel far more prepared when you're faced with these conversations. And as we've learned before, this isn't about debating the other person. It's about speaking from the heart to explain why this is an issue that means something to us. For instance, I could say, when politicians use dehumanizing language, my friends experience more hate. There is a direct correlation. I work with people seeking sanctuary and they report feeling more scared and unsafe when politicians use this language. And I think that everyone should feel safe in our community. So finally, if you don't have lived experience of seeking sanctuary yourself, wherever possible, bring in the experiences of people who do, because MPs don't often hear from people who have been through the asylum system. And sometimes hearing from people who have this lived experience can have the most impact. So last year, after meeting with a group of people who have lived experience, MP Christian Wakefield apologised in the Commons for how he'd spoken about people seeking asylum. He said, "I want to go on record and say that I was wrong and I'm sorry for saying it." And that was a direct result of him talking with people who'd been through the asylum system. So these conversations have massive impact. Okay, so I've done a huge amount of talking and I actually feel like I'm slightly losing my voice. And you've done a lot of listening. And obviously the purpose of this programme is to encourage conversations. So we'd like to go into breakout rooms now for about 30 minutes so we can start sharing ideas and reflections.
Before we go into the breakout rooms, a little reminder that this is a safe and supportive space. So please use this as an opportunity to celebrate each other and our efforts to speak up for sanctuary. Please respect each other and make space for those who might speak less. Like myself, I've been speaking less, though of course there is absolutely no pressure to speak if you don't want to. And it will be fantastic if we can discuss this in our group. Like one, what are you currently doing to speak up for refugee rights? You can share with the group what is working. If you're just starting your journey, that's great too. You can share your motivations for coming today. And also, it will be great to look forward and reflect on the points covered in this presentation. Where in your community could you be speaking up for sanctuary? What opportunities are there? And what connections do you already have and could you be making? Next, you can reflect on what barriers you might face. We want our plans to be very, very realistic. So as a group, can we all think of what support you might need to overcome the barriers that you're facing regarding speaking up? And we'll bring you back in about 30 minutes. So yeah, see you in your individual groups.
And the facilitators will remind you of the questions. So don't worry about remembering those questions. And yeah, Hopefully Megan will be able to see.
Everyone's back.
Okay, brilliant. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much. I hope you've had some interesting conversations. If you had any particularly interesting ideas, please do put them in the chat box so everyone can see. So we all know that talking about these subjects really isn't easy, and reaching outside of our echo chambers really isn't easy. So the most important thing is to practice, and the best way to practice is simply by chatting. The more we chat, the easier talking about these things will become. You can also properly practice. That's about sitting down and working out which values and messages you want to use to counter recurring misinformation or hostility that you hear. Then practice your responses on the bus, in the shower, with your family. The aim here is that you will have actively changed the story so much that when we encounter a change maker or a family member or a friend who says something misinformed and we have to reactively change the story, we feel comfortable and confident in that moment. Now, it's far more likely that you're going to stick with this journey if you're not going at it alone. Can you start down this path with a friend? If you're not already in a City of Sanctuary group or another refugee support organisation, then see if a like-minded friend wants to commit to speaking up for refugee rights with you. You can practice together and celebrate each other's actions. Now, we're hoping soon to work with our friends at Aid Alliance and Safe Passage to develop a friendly online space where people can come together and practice having these tough conversations and then compare what's working and what's not working. So watch this space for information on that coming soon. It's also worth finding out if you live in a strategically important location. If your constituency is a swing seat, which means that it needs only a small number of votes to change the result, then supercharge your efforts to share your values and encourage people to use their votes to stand up for welcome and compassion. Has your area experienced a surge of far right activity? Sadly, that's becoming more prevalent all over the country. If that is the case, get connected with like-minded people and encourage those with influence, those movers and shakers that we discussed earlier, to stand up for refugee rights. Counter hostility by working with your local media to platform good news stories celebrating community, welcome, and solidarity. And in both these instances, get organised. You may want to get together with other groups and audit your resources. Who has space for people to meet in so you can practice these skills? Who has communication skills so you can reach others via social media? Who has money for posters and so forth? We're exponentially more impactful when we pool our resources together. Now, if you'll let me, I'd like to set you a little bit of homework. This week, spend some time to sit down and really soul search your motivations for stepping up. Start working out your own story. Then the week after that, start testing it out. Challenge yourself to actively talk about refugee rights, your motivations and your values with someone who you wouldn't normally talk about these things with. Go slow, see how it makes you feel, see how people respond, and then adjust accordingly so you feel a bit more comfortable. Conversations are powerful, so we need to be having a lot more of them. Now, in the handbook, there is a handy series of tick boxes so you can help chart your progress and to encourage you to keep going. And now, before we finish up, Comfort, over to you for another really quick poll.
Okay, yes, I'd like to do another really quick poll. Now, who now feels confident speaking about refugee rights?
So after that course, who's feeling comfortable about speaking about refugee rights now?
Sorry, Hannah, the poll doesn't seem to now be working on my laptop. Can you give it a try on yours? It says I'm logged in from another device.
Let's see. Okay. Here we go.
On your screen now.
Now we're hoping more of you might be feeling confident. Brilliant. Few more moments. Nearly all of you have voted.
Okay, we have a couple more.
That's about it.
Okay. Yeah, we now have 24% of us feeling very confident to speak up for refugee rights. We have 67% of us moderately confident, and we have 8% of us a little confident, and we have 0% not confident. Earlier on, we have about 34%, but now we have nobody.
Woohoo.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well
That's
done, everybody.
excellent news. So thank you so much, everybody. We really hope that you got something from this evening. This is only the second time that we've delivered this programme, so we'd really like to get your feedback. I will be sending a feedback form tomorrow, so please do just spend a minute filling that in. I'd also love to hear from you to let me know how you're using the handbook and what results you're having from your conversations, good or bad. All feedback is useful. So you can reach us on social media or via my email, which is up on the screen. Yeah.
Before we say goodbye, if you have enjoyed this session, please do consider making a donation. We are a really small organization, so your support means a lot, means the world to us. Thanks, everyone. Please donate to support refugees, people who are still in the asylum system, refugees like myself. It's the support that we get from people like you that has helped me. And there are more people to be helped. Please support us by donating. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, everybody. Really lovely to see you all. We're going to be running more of these sessions in the future. So yeah, sign up to our newsletter and tell your friends. And we'll be sending a recording of this event out tomorrow as well, if you know anyone that couldn't make tonight. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Bye. Thank you for
Bye.
coming.